This video is for Patrick, the first King of the Castle patron. Arrival is a thoroughly modern movie. On the surface, it's about an alien invasion, but fundamentally it's about complexity and communication. Both themes are interwoven with one another as the protagonist Louise and her physicist soon-to-be partner Ian try to establish what the aliens want and why they are here on Earth. However, they are surrounded by the hostile and paranoid political and military institutions that are far more skeptical about the aliens' intentions than the intellectuals that have actually communicated with them. These institutions, wary of yesterday's problems that had to be put on the back burner today, expect results and answers as soon as possible. Throughout the film, however, Louise insists that trying to solve this global issue is going to take at the very least months to solve, let alone the 3,000 years humanity has to study the language of time and prepare for the second arrival. This waiting game unsettles the public as we hear of instances of looting taking place, and before that, the film shows us a large, messy crowd of people and vehicles stopped right outside the perimeter surrounding the ship. These are just examples of the knock-on effects of the arrival though. Right up until the 18-minute mark, the opening segment of the film focuses predominantly on the human response to an alien encounter on an ordinary day, allowing for what I'll call a blurred perspective on the arrival, in that the only time the ship is shown to the audience before then is on a news channel in low-quality handheld footage until Louise sees the ship for herself. This certainly isn't customary of the more operatic forms of science fiction we've become accustomed to, where spectacle is at the forefront of the experience. Arrival certainly does have its own spectacular elements, such as this breathtakingly long shot of the spaceship and its surrounding area, but it's certainly not appealing in the same way that the bright and colourful action sequences of Star Wars are. The low contrast of the film, the slow camera movements, the ugly shape and colour of the ship itself, even the interior of the military bases have had the saturation reduced in order to show that this isn't going to be a very fun experience for the viewer or the characters of this film.
We created an approach for the movie that we call dirty sci-fi, which means that we were trying to create the feeling that this was happening on a bad Tuesday morning, and Bradford brought a lot of humanity and beauty to the movie.
The human element is portrayed through how the military treat this as a knife-edge situation, despite there isn't a single human casualty from alien hands throughout the entire film. The fact we don't have a unified language or leader becomes a hindrance to having a global understanding of the heptapods. The language hindrance takes its form in three instances. Firstly, when the Colonel visits Louise at the beginning of the film, he prods an audio player in front of her and asks if she recognizes any specific words or phrases. The implication that she would even have a slither of understanding of what's being said displays what kind of naive assumptions people have about language. This leads on to the second example. When we first see Ian on the helicopter, he comes prepared with a list of questions for the aliens, naively assuming that they would be able to understand him on a first encounter. And thirdly, the encounter I just mentioned is cut short, which could be seen as teasing from the director or trying to trim time off for the final cut. However, it struck me as odd that any form of understanding or resolution would come as a result of one conversation. Again, we forget how monstrous of a task has been given to our two protagonists. We simplify the world in order to understand it, but when something as complex as an alien species drops down, we begin to panic simply because we can't get our heads around it. Akin to the way children are brought up, Louise and Ian teach the heptapods to imitate them. Of course, we assume that this method of learning has come from Louise's experience with her child, but of course we later learn that this was not the case. Throughout this learning section of the film, wordless vocal music plays underneath, heard also during the credits of the film. This track, alongside the rest of the music Johan Johansson wrote for the film, breathes unfamiliarity as the characters slowly experience communicating with two voiceless beings. There is, however, one piece of music used at the beginning and ending of the film that wasn't written by Johansson. Max Richter's On the Nature of Daylight. I certainly felt I'd heard this song before when I first watched Arrival, and it has in fact been played in several other films like Stranger Than Fiction and Shutter Island. Given they hired somebody to write a full score for Arrival and also used this song, this prevented the film from being nominated for the Oscar for Best Original Score. But the song is placed underneath images of Louise losing her child, surrounding the viewer with the familiarity of losing a loved one to sickness. There's also the fact the album this song is taken off was written in opposition to the 2003 invasion of Iraq, echoing the stubborn rejection of military tactics in times of uncertainty. This clash of familiarity and uncertainty is another aspect of the film that makes its story so impactful. The violent manner of those who would seek to destroy the heptapods also demonstrates how ill-equipped humanity is for third-kind contact. The selfish motives of the soldier, pressured by his wife because he's been away from her for so long, is understandable from where we're sat. However, when the entire planet is at stake and other factions of the world are threatening an end to the chaos, it seems pretty appealing for a young man with no name to fire the first arrow. Humans have concocted so many fantasies about what would happen in the event of an alien invasion, but we wouldn't think about the day after, or the week after, or even the month after. Complexity requires time, and the heptapods are fully aware of this too by giving us the language of time. Complexity is also explored through the design of the film. The shape of the ship was inspired by the 15 Eunomia asteroid that fascinated Denis Villeneuve during research for the film. It's renowned for being one of the largest asteroids in the belt and is oddly shaped too. The gargantuan size of the ship represents the huge challenge set for humanity over the next 3,000 years. Even the aliens look as though they had a lot of thought put into their design. They look like giant squids when we see them in their full form, and also squirt ink like an octopus. Both creatures named, being cephalopods, are renowned for their intelligence. Of course, renowned being that I only know about Paul the Octopus's ability to predict the outcomes of football matches back in 2010, so don't take me as some kind of expert on cephalopod intelligence.
Gastropods, lamellibranchs, cephalopods! Oh, mollusks, I thought you said bacon.
Now, a bit of speculation here. I'd be interested to hear what you guys think of this, but I firmly believe that these ships contain wormholes within them. When we see the humans boarding the ship, the transfer from one gravity pocket to another is actually moving the beings from one location in space-time to another. The aliens aren't actually there on Earth in case they risk contamination, just like we do, and this also explains why the spaceships just fade out of existence instead of physically traveling back home. Now, I think my theory falls somewhat flat when we see Louise coming into direct contact with the heptapods, but simultaneously she can breathe, and clearly the heptapods don't care about being contaminated with anything if she comes into direct contact with them. I won't try and speculate too hard because not only is this an analysis of the film, but as the film very firmly suggests, trying to understand an alien invasion is like trying to understand advanced physics, culture, language, and every element of understanding humans have created over the short span of existence we've inhabited this Earth, all crammed into one subject. It's impossible to understand them until we can communicate with them. Thanks for watching. Now, I have only one issue with the movie, and I'm not sure if I was the only person who experienced this, but the first time I watched this film, there were no subtitles for the aliens when Louise goes up in the pod to talk to them. I will say I didn't watch it in the cinema when I first watched it, but the second time I watched it preparing for this video was on Amazon Prime, where the subtitles were there. If anybody knows what I'm talking about, please leave a comment below, where we will continue this discussion.